we're back for another episode.
I know it seems like it's been a bit, but it really hadn't.
I know, right? I mean,
We're kind of getting regular
been a week
at doing these things, yeah.
Something like that. But before that, it had been a couple of weeks, so
it is, yeah.
Makes a difference, I think.
I think just because days all come together.
It's so
I
true.
really don't know when I did anything anymore.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah. So we have a guest this morning. We have Dr. Tanner Hargrove, who teaches psychology here at Amarillo College. He's kind of a rock star. Do you want to talk about yourself a little bit?
I don't know that I would consider myself a rock star.
Oh,
but,
Deadpool?
Deadpool.
yeah, the reference is more Deadpool-ish. But yeah, so I teach full-time here at Amarillo College in the psychology department. I teach child psychology, lifespan, and then general psych. And then I'm also a marriage and family therapist and professional counselor. And so if I'm not here, I'm usually there working with clients on a consistent basis, keeping a little small private practice open and keeping my family alive. So
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good stuff. I mean, it's all important. We always hear good things about your classroom, and I mean that's really the best. Honestly, it's the most important thing we do here.
Sure.
And I honestly also I used to follow Tanner up in the classroom. Sometimes he would be exiting a class, I would be going in, and I'm not the only person on campus that's experienced this problem where I wanted to be able to write on the board, but what he had drawn on there for his last class was so artistic. I was like, man, I should maybe leave this up here. Kind of like
Van Gogh.
you know how Banksy?
Okay.
No, more like Banksy.
Oh, Banksy.
Banksy,
yes.
like we'll put a stencil up on like something, and people are like, man. I mean, I know it's kind of vandalism. I need to erase it, but it's really. It's
I don't want to do it.
Yeah, it's really kind of.
Well, yeah,
beautiful,
people don't have that problem with me. I don't.
Me either.
People are like, what is to get it off?
Yeah, it looks like a doctor's writing.
Yeah,
It
they're
just
like,
scribbles.
get it off.
That's funny.
So last week we talked about repressed memories, right?
Yes.
So,
we did.
and I mean, I'm not trying to bring just all psychologists on here or anything, but it is really interesting because I think it informs a lot of what government does, and government is trying to do as well, because there's marketing strategies and all kinds of research, and they utilize the expertise of psychologists all the time.
Right.
And so, and frankly, marketing people does sometimes generally have some type of a background in psychology. And
Well, I think I told you. Did I tell you I was actually going to be I was a marketing major before I decided to go psychology.
wow, really?
Yeah.
So, what kind of marketing did you want to do?
I don't know, because that's was you start off, and I thought, yep, I want to be in business and marketing, and then I got in it, and I really liked psychology instead. So that's kind of where I went. But I think that the idea, like politics, has changed. I think, and it was more about the political idea of what we're doing, right? Like what can we do? But now they've really utilized media and marketing and the commercials, and can we slander whoever so we can get them, so people remember this thing, and then they also remember it when they go to vote. And that's kind of what it is. It's like, what can we do to really stick in people's heads so that when they do vote, that this is the thing they think about instead of anything else they might have said, which may be amazing.
Right.
So,
Have you ever seen Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
love it.
Okay, the politician that's in there that's at the radio station.
Yes.
Right.
And he's talking to I forget what the guy's name is that's walking in and out. The guy with the slick back hair. He's always
Yes.
like, my hair. that guy. And
It's George Clooney.
It's George Clooney's character.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can't think of his name either.
Absolutely hysterical. And anyway, it's a remarkable thing. I think that because Mitt Romney used to quote that guy all the time. Anytime he would do a market spot, he would quote that guy, and he'd be like, I don't know. I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was always something along those lines.
Interesting.
Now, the reason that, you mentioned ballots.
Yeah.
I don't know any other industry, ever, that will spend so much money, so much time, and so much effort trying to get people to simply change or remember one checkbox on that ballot. And the implications now of people checking one box or another is so great that it's almost makes it seem like every single election is the end of the world, and you have to kind of market it that way because the stakes are so high. And a good example of that is just how people have historically looked at, the Trump administration and before that, the Obama administration. And before that, the Bush administration, and before that, so on and so forth. And it's been like that for quite a while. Maybe media makes things better. Maybe it kind of exacerbates an already pre-existing problem, and I mean, it makes you wonder whether or not it ever really was about policy in the sense that I think it still is about policy. I think that's still the center for serious statesmen,
right?
For serious, mature statesmen that are only there to try to serve and better the public. But you have to be cognizant at the same time of this other conversation that's constantly going on outside of that. That's the nonstop marketing campaign. You know, I mean, Abraham Lincoln, I think, right? When he was running for president, he was one of the folks that didn't have to necessarily go out and, you know, constantly campaign, right? I mean, so the question is, would we have an Abraham Lincoln had this kind of campaign style been?
You know why? Because there's this thing, we've talked about it many times, is the idea of the halo effect. And we know that with all the presidencies that the majority of the taller person won.
Sure.
And that's crazy. Like that, how...
And he's a wrestler as well.
Right. Now, how does that play into it? Like, how can, just because they're taller, but it does. It plays into this whole psychological effect of, okay, if they're taller, they're smarter, they're better. That guy's kind of short.
They're healthier,
he doesn't
stronger.
look right.
Yeah.
And it does. So, I mean, I think even if you have like a media campaign and it's not shot correctly, it's not, whatever you're saying is not done correctly, it could definitely change the things that you remember when you do go. So were they tall enough? Ooh, were they good looking? Oh, were they, and did the way they talked, did it bug me? And if it didn't, then those are the things that we remember because it's on a more personal.
It's a personal preference.
Sure.
So you're playing to personal preferences. That's
Absolutely.
exactly. So, I mean, yeah, we have, and then by the same standard, I guess that not to oversimplify, but we could probably make an argument too that if that's true, then and policy is always required, particularly in a republic or a Republican form of government with a capital R, not the party but the style of government. If that's true, and you require consent from the people to be able to do things, you have to be popular.
Sure.
No matter what, you have to be popular, and that would mean that this is an age-old problem. And I mean, right now we're getting ready to have Easter. This is not because of the religious holiday or anything, but I mean, it's the time to kind of be thinking specifically for large swaths of the Christian population specifically, to be thinking about, you know, who is Christ? Who was Jesus Christ? Like, what is the problem? What is the implications of what happened there, you know, in Jerusalem? And what was the criminal implication, and what was the social implication, what was the political implication? And I guess you could say there's a psychological component to it. And the Pharisees, the traditional, the moralistic, all those things are all, I mean, they're fascinating.
Again, like the truth is we don't know what really happened. We don't know what happened, but we do, like, what is written, what is passed on, is what we remember. And then that's what really, I guess, shapes our perception of the whole situation. When it comes down to religion, politics, certain people. And so I think that when you talk about it plays into everything that we deal with now.
Well, I think one of the things that we've noticed with social media in particular when it comes to this regard, right? Because all of this kind of feels connected on some levels. So if we're talking about politics, if we're talking about how do you become popular, if we're talking about the halo effect, if we're talking about some of these different aspects, part of what social media has done is it's drawn some stuff to the surface that normally wouldn't have been on the surface. So the ways in which, like, people are taking pieces of what some people are saying, splicing them together, and then that becomes the dominant message. And then as a result, we have this really shallow experience across the board. And then I think part of what's happening is we're putting a lot of our things that, in my opinion, shouldn't be in public opinion on public display. Then as a result, we're making objective or subjective decisions about some of these opinions that get thrown out there, whether it's about Jesus or whether it's about Trump or whether it's about whatever the candidate is. And then as a result, our opinions are being swayed, and then we're getting offended, and then our perceptions are shifted because of the offense that we've taken based off of essentially 2-inch thick perspective of issues that should have more than.
I totally agree.
4
Like,
Yeah, that's
feet.
good stuff. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, like social media all the time,
100%.
we talk about it. Like, you put stuff out there and then you expect everybody to say, oh, I like it.
Right.
And then when they don't, we take a major offense to it, but they don't even know us. Like, if you look at, I was talking about this in class the other day because we were talking about adolescent suicide. And I said,
Sounds thrilling.
It is. It was very. But we were talking about social media and the implications. And I said, well, how many people are your friends on social media? And they were like, well, I have followers. And I was like, wait, but they come in as your friends. And but how many of those people would you call if you were in trouble or if you had something, or that you really care about their opinion? And then they all kind of sat there, and I said, but we always talk about if something happens on social media, it does change the way you feel about yourself, change the way you feel about other things. And those people aren't even your friends, and most of them you don't even know. And that's what I think social media plays into. And I think media has done a great job at that. Like, we don't know. We really, truly don't know so many things about so many of the things that are being published and put on. We don't know about it unless we actually do a deep dive. And most of the time, we feel like we don't have time. So we do look for those short bits.
Sure.
And it definitely changes our memory of things, the way that we perceive things, and then, of course, how we act on them.
Which is what I was just thinking, right? Like, you started this conversation, I guess, I don't know the last time you maybe had a podcast, but this idea around these idea of repressed memories and the ways in which our memory states can maybe get altered, or the way that our perceptions are kind of at play when it comes to what it is that we're able to recall. And this all feels super connected to me, right?
It is.
So my memory recollection is not a simple recollection of a memory, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because I think the memory gets wrapped in and shrouded in multiple different substantive experiences, whether that's from the media that I'm consuming, whether it's the relationships I'm having. And then I think what ends up happening is we start attaching qualitative value to some of the experiences that we're having on some of these platforms. And that's the part that I feel like is so risky.
Absolutely.
Is that all of a sudden I'm adopting some emotional content that might not actually be mine.
Right.
And then it's getting attached to my own memory recall. And then whether I'm walking up to a ballot to make a decision about who it is that I'm going to vote for, or whether or not I'm in a therapist's office trying to recall certain memories across the board, all of this stuff is getting pulled up. And I tend to argue that I don't know that we're getting real perspectives on memory recall because it's just not possible.
Well, I think memory recall is sketchy in the first place, right?
I do too.
It is, I think. And it makes it where that we have this issue of are they real? And we have the issue of like what's influenced it, who has the influence on it.
Right.
And we were talking about last time there's a movie called Memento. Have you seen that?
No.
It's really interesting. He has a type of amnesia where he only wakes up and remembers, and he can't form new memories.
Oh.
So he starts putting them all over him. But in it, he says the best thing. He says, memory is not a record. It is just your perception. It's your interpretation of the event.
Sure.
So everything can be changed by information that you're receiving. It could be changed by the person that you're receiving it from. It could be even just the room and how you feel that day. It all of a sudden changes the memory.
I agree.
Right. It kind of makes you think there's several, there's lots of like boxing terms that get mixed in with, and I love talking about this specifically because it's I think it's one of the analogies that people use all the time in politics, which is that for example, keep up your footwork, or make sure you stay away from the jabs, or watch the jabs, or or if you want to lean into the jabs in order to get to land something, you can. If you watch that stuff enough and kind of see. You could do that essentially with every sport. Baseball is another popular one, right? It's so. That seems like something that maybe is disconnected in some way. And the reason I bring it up is because you mentioned it's shaped by our perception of it at the time, right? So if you're a viewer, sometimes the things that are the most obvious things for the fighter to have missed. Because they're the ones in the arena, and this is Teddy Roosevelt, this is an Aaron Favor, because they're the man in the arena, and it could be a woman. It's not
Right.
man or woman. But if you're the person in the arena, then things look very different, and the risks are real, the stakes are real, and so you're sweating bullets.
Sure.
And it's a real deal. And so anyway, I ask this because way that people remember. Last week we talked about repressed memories. So Tanner, when people are trying to remember big events, collective memory is something that we kind of discussed a little bit last week, and maybe even I think we were doing it also on a kind of an individual level.
Yeah, probably.
But what is Tanner? How does that dynamic play into more of a historical way people look at the past? How can it change? I know it's a huge question. I'm giving you a football and telling you to run.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm sitting here thinking about, and I don't know if this is going to answer your question, Aaron, so you can tell me if it does or not. But when I have conversations with my students around memory, right? We have a whole section in our classes that addresses specifically memory. We talk about central route processing versus peripheral route processing. And one of the questions I ask my students is, I want you to raise your hand if you have an opinion about abortion. And usually almost every hand in the class goes up, or at least 90% of the hands go up, right? Now notice my question is specific. I didn't ask if anyone has had an abortion. I just ask if you have an opinion about it. And they all raise their hand. And then I say, keep your hand up if your opinion has been formed through personal experience with an abortion or someone who's had it. All but very rarely will any hand stay up. Which to me speaks to this idea, right? If it's memory recall or if it's developing an opinion about something, oftentimes our brain, I don't think it has the ability to keep distinctly different what is actual firsthand encounter or experience with something versus everything that's been wrapped around it. There's this concept that I used to teach when I taught English called the symbolic complex. And he talks about this idea of, let's recall the Grand Canyon. And we can have a conversation about the Grand Canyon, right? I can tell you a lot about the Grand Canyon. It's the biggest canyon in maybe the world. It's in this area of the country that's kind of desertous. It has lots of ups and downs, and it's got a lot of red dirt, and you can go see it, and it's connected to the Hoover Dam, and blah, blah, blah. Guess what? I've never been to the Grand Canyon.
I have.
Right?
Yeah.
So Beth's experience is going to be very different than my experience.
Yeah.
However, if you had just had conversations with us about what we recall about the Grand Canyon, we're both going to have opinions, and it might seem like we've both been there, but depending on our experience with the actual Grand Canyon itself is going to be different. And so this idea of the symbolic complex would suggest that the only person who's genuinely experienced the Grand Canyon is maybe a Native American or someone who was walking alongside, and then all of a sudden the bottom of the earth fell out, and he was like, holy shit, there's this massive hole in the earth.
Yeah.
And so now all of a sudden that's the only person, and then everyone after that has these recollections that are shrouded in other people's experiences or pictures or perceptions
right.
So when it comes to these collective experiences around past events, it's very complicated to be able to say, right, we could take COVID and we could have these conversations about COVID and what everybody remembers about COVID. And it's like, yeah, also think about what's happened in the last 5 years around this event that might be impacting the way we're recalling these things right now. So I think the question is very complex because I think when we look at historical events across the board, whether we're talking about Abraham Lincoln, COVID, the Holocaust, my children are talking about the Holocaust right now, I guess, in school. Yeah. And so it's very interesting to hear them talk through some of that stuff. But sure. I think all of these things get very much wrapped in other experiences and emotions,
other people's opinion.
100%.
Because the people who are telling you about it, they will have an opinion. And so sometimes they're just the way that they speak about it and the information that they tell you definitely is going to influence how you now remember it, recall, right. and then perceive the whole situation.
Right.
And I mean, just like the idea when you're saying the person in the ring, I think that when you're actually in the situation, you may remember it completely different than the person who heard about it.
Right.
Or because your perception may be in the minute, I'm just doing what I need to do to get through. Mm-hmm. Okay, but when we look back on it, we should have been well, you shouldn't have done that. Shouldn't have done that. That was not okay. But in the moment, it seemed like the only choice.
And it might have been the only choice.
Absolutely. Right. And that's the point.
Right.
And so it's hard. We talked about this before. It's hard to judge people from the past on what we know now.
Sure.
You can't, we don't, during that time, when they were in it, it was different. Because now what we remember of the situation seems like a horrible thing and, I would have done this and you don't know what you would have done.
It reminds me of all of our conversations we had with in and around, I guess, the anti-racism
Oh, yeah.
stuff, and then talking about 2020. It's one of the pivotal things that really isn't attached to COVID, but gets attached to COVID.
Absolutely.
And the instability and a whole bunch of other stuff that was going on. It's really interesting. But we were talking about the Holocaust specifically. I think you mentioned that your kiddos are asking questions about that.
How old are your kids? Can you?
So I've got an 11-year-old son and a 9-year-old daughter.
Okay, that seems pretty young to me to be talking about the Holocaust, but that's
Well,
just...
he came home with a book, and I was like, dude, what is this book? He was like, well, it was the plan on how to kill Hitler. And I was like, is that fiction or nonfiction?
Yeah.
He's like, no, Papa, it's what people plan to do. And I'm like, no, dude, like, let's really make sure that we understand what you're talking about here. But yeah.
Yeah, I just think that's kind of young, but go ahead, sorry.
No, it is. Like
Side note.
I mean, but to kind of make that, to drive that point home, though, I mean, that makes it more extremely relevant and pertinent
Sure.
to be addressing like those specifically early, I guess, with, and having somebody responsible and good trying to, I guess, guide that experience. There was one specific thing that recently we've been dealing with is because it's Easter, both of my kids, and because we talk about also our classroom experiences, I have lots of parents that are in my classes. And so we get to talk about a lot of shared experience, which is super cool. And one of the things that they also deal with young kids is that they're constantly trying to internalize even the story of Easter and what is this story and what does it mean and how real can it be, or how they're trying to take something that, frankly, I can't answer.
Yeah.
And trying to form thoughts and ways of, I guess, bounding all of these ideas that are unbelievable. They're unbelievable ideas.
Right.
That's the whole idea. I think the central part of it is that it really is an unbelievable story.
Sure.
And so my daughter just a couple of days ago asked me to pretend like I was Jesus and that she was Mary, and she wanted to catch me as I was coming off the cross. And I was like, wow, that's intense. That's like what a profound thing. Of course, I don't think she necessarily understands.
That's so much. Mine are like, what does egg have to do with,
Yeah.
And a bunny? Like, how does a bunny have an egg? Those are the questions mine.
And what about the chocolate?
Yeah. See? Not,
and the money.
Mine, it's not like, what? They're like, this doesn't make sense. This is what it's about, then why is this attached to it? Those are the questions my brilliant, lovely kids
They're good
ask.
questions. I still want to know where the Easter eggs and the... I want to find a couple of Easter eggs with some money and chocolate.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
I'm going to find the gold one with my mom.
But how is a 4-year-old, how is their experience of trying to interpret an event that's complex any less credible than a grown adult? And I know that, obviously we have different formations of our brain and maturity levels and stuff. I think
it's a great way to see it, because I think we as adults try to make it like, oh yeah, we totally get stuff, and we don't. And I think that's why we always say children are so much more realistic, so much purer, because they don't try to hide it, that they don't know something. Right. And they ask the question that we might all be thinking.
Sure.
I totally agree. They're pretty amazing. What time is it?
We're going to have to go.
Is it 20? Okay. Well, yeah, we have classes. So, well, thank you everybody for joining in.
We'll have to come again.
Absolutely.
Let's do, and I think it's kind of fun to just do it. And then
Absolutely. Just throwing it together. And now that we've done this, we have precedent for it. Guess as long as the stuff recorded audio, I'll be able to go back and and think it's hilarious, and need to make sure to do the we need to get like some type of a background music going that would make us go. And there is a dances, sometimes you go
clap.
Bop, 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 bop.
Yeah,
like at baseball games. That would be awesome. Yeah. Anyway, okay, well, thank you all very much. Have a wonderful day.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Santa, for joining us.
For
sure.